I want to show you one more image, and this is a sketch. And the reason I'm using a sketch is you can frequently use sketches to be converted into vector objects, and then you can take those into motion, and it can get very interesting. This sketch also came from Unsplash.com, and you can see the name of the artist right here. Obviously, this is more complex, but it can be very interesting. If you were to convert it directly in Vectornator, without making any changes, I'll just choose Sketch as the mode and auto trace it. You get kind of a cool looking result, but again, it's many, 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 many shape layers, which is fine if you just want to keep it as a single vector object like a PDF or a .ai and scale it as much as you want. But we're interested in accessing the separate components, so we probably want to cut down the number of shapes, just like we did with the much more simple example. What's cool about Pixelmator Pro is there's so many ways to manipulate the image before turning it into vectors in Vectornator. And I just want to give you a little sample of what you can do. So I've opened up this image in Pixelmator Pro. You can see it's a single image layer here. And when you're preparing these, I'm just encouraging you to experiment here with two specific areas. This right here are the color adjustments, and then one right below it are the effects. And I'll show you what I've done here. I've turned it off right now, but when you choose color adjustments, everything you can do is just listed down here, and you can open them and then use them. I've already used the curves. If I open it, it turns them on. I wish it would tell you which one of these have been adjusted, because the only one adjusted is curves. It doesn't indicate that. But you can see what I've done is basically remove the background. So I'm trying to get more contrast. When I turn this into vectors, I don't want the background all be turning into vectors. So that was my first goal. My second goal is I don't want so many shapes necessarily. So I'd like to simplify this. One way of doing that is by taking an image and blurring it and then sharpening it afterwards, so that you take a lot of detail and blur it out and then collect together what's left into single objects instead of multiple objects. So if I go back to effects, you can see I've got a bunch of different effects here all turned off. So I first added a Gaussian blur. And the idea after that is to, once you blur it, to sharpen it. So I added multiple sharpen filters, each one at the max. And you can see now I've changed some of those multiple lines into single lines. In addition, I used a threshold effect in order to take things even further, where you can see it's really filled in a lot of the areas here. And you can keep going back and forth and adjusting each of these. Like I could go back into the color adjustments and play with how much I've adjusted the curves in order to get a different effect. It's really cool, it's exciting and fun to do. So I definitely recommend playing around with this a little bit. Back in the effects, I also have a high pass filter that I use that helped me get even more specific definition here. The other thing you can do is try to change the order of these operations. For instance, if I move the threshold up above these sharpens, I get a very different result. I'll undo that. So play with the order of these filters. Blurs and sharpens are great. Threshold is great. High pass filter can be useful. So I did different versions of that here, exported them out, brought them into Vectornator, used Autotrace to make vectors out of them, exported SVG from Vectornator, brought that back in Pixelmator Pro, and exported motion projects. What I ended up with in motion are several different things. Here's one of them, where I've reduced the number of objects to just a couple dozen instead of hundreds. And I just think it's a beautiful kind of look. And of course, these are motion shapes, so you can colorize them and outline them and access the points any way you like. It's very jagged, but I really like how it looks. And once you colorize it, you can make it look really beautiful. Now, that's one thing I did. I also took in a separate version where I had added the high pass filter. I ended up with lots of paths here, but this path in particular is interesting. If I hold on the Option key so I can solo it, that one path, I'll right click so you can see all the points, is a single path of the entire model there. I'll press Shift S, which is really cool. So I can copy that, and then I can go back to this one and paste it in, Command V to paste. And I can start, I'm hitting Command left bracket to move it back behind the other layers in order to create sort of an outline look to the model, because it missed that. Like if I turn that off, you don't really get the full sense of her shape of her head. And then of course I could colorize that and go further with it to, really make it interesting. So I just love this so much. What I did as well is I colorized all of the foreground shapes here differently from the background shapes. And I have a little camera move on this that moves up, and you can see there's no loss of resolution as the camera pushes through it. And I turned on recording and moved each of these shapes out so that when I play, those shapes come in and assemble, and then the camera comes and pushes in afterwards. So I just want to give you some ideas of what you can do with a little bit more complex photographic images that you can prepare in Pixelmator Pro for turning into vectors in Vectornator, and then exporting that SVG from Vectornator in order to use Pixelmator Pro to export a motion project where you can have all your creative control here. That's it for this lesson. I hope you found it valuable. We always welcome your feedback or any questions at support@rippletraining.com. This is Mark Spencer, and thanks again for watching.